What if your child's online game was a trap designed to destroy them, and the government turned a blind eye because they're black? That's the chilling reality Elise faced, and it's where our story begins. Picture a corner of the city the downtown big shots forgot, a gritty black neighborhood where resilience was as common as the cracked sidewalks. Houses with rain-stained walls, rooftops with paint peeling like old memories, and a lone street lamp flickering to life each evening, casting a dim glow over the streets. But in those worn-out alleys, life pulsed with color, heart, and grit, the kind that comes from generations of black families holding on tight despite the odds stacked against them. Mornings were a hustle. Women lined up with buckets at the community pump, swapping stories and worries over the clank of metal. Men trudged to factories or set up street stalls, hoping to scrape together enough for the day, all while navigating a system that seemed designed to keep them down. And the kids? They were the heartbeat of the place. Their laughter drowned out the grind, kicking soccer balls, spinning old tires, their giggles weaving through the air like a promise of better days. A reminder that even in a world that often overlooked black children, joy could still bloom. In a small house on a quiet corner lived Elise. She was an ordinary woman, but there was something extraordinary about her. A spark that shone through her tired eyes. Every morning she swept her tiny porch, her hands steady despite the weight of her world. She'd take her son, Ethan. She wasn't rich, didn't have powerful friends or fancy degrees. But the women in the neighborhood would sit on their stoops and say, "Elise, your strength is our greatest treasure." And strong she was. Years ago, she'd lost her husband to a sudden illness, leaving her to raise Ethan alone. By day, she scrubbed floors at the local school, keeping it clean for the black kids who deserved a shot at a better life. By night, she sewed clothes under a flickering bulb, her fingers nimble despite the ache. Every penny she saved went toward Ethan's dreams. He was a bright kid, always buried in books, his eyes lighting up when he talked about becoming a doctor or an engineer. Elise saw that spark and vowed to protect it no matter what. The neighborhood called her the mother of the block. If a kid skinned their knee, she'd kneel beside them, wiping tears with a gentle hand. If a neighbor fell sick, she'd run to the pharmacy, no questions asked. Her house's walls were cracked, patched with hope and duct tape. But her heart was wide open, big enough to hold every soul in the community. A community of black families who knew the sting of being overlooked, undervalued, and often outright ignored by the powers that be. Every evening, Elise would drag an old wooden chair outside her door and sit under the stars. She'd gaze up, her eyes tracing the constellations, and whisper a prayer. "Lord, keep my Ethan safe. Let his dreams shine bright. Spare him the pain I've carried." That was her world. A small black neighborhood, a little boy, and 1,000 dreams she tucked into her heart. But this wasn't a fairy tale. Poverty clung to every doorstep like damp rot. Men came home with empty pockets, their faces heavy with defeat. Women stretched groceries to feed hungry mouths, their voices sharp with worry. Young guys sometimes fought in the streets, their frustration boiling over in clenched fists. The police patrolled, more likely to harass than help, their sirens a constant reminder of how the system viewed black lives as threats rather than people deserving protection. Yet the community held tight. They leaned on each other, sharing meals, stories, and laughter to keep the darkness at bay. At one corner, old Walter's ancient radio blared jazz every evening, drawing the young crowd. "This music reminds us we're still breathing," he'd say, his voice raspy but warm, a cigarette dangling from his lips. At the other end, Mrs. Clara, a tough but kind-hearted elder, opened her home to kids. Her tiny room was stacked floor to ceiling with books, a treasure trove of stories. Ethan was a regular, devouring novels under her watchful eye. "Knowledge cuts through darkness, child," she'd tell him, her voice firm but kind. Elise watched it all, her heart swelling with pride and pain. "This is my home," she'd think. "It's got scars, it's got joy, but it's mine." Her soft spot was the kids. Seeing them chase each other down the street, she'd say, "They're our future. If they can laugh, the world's got a chance to heal." Evenings brought moments of magic. Folks dragged chairs outside. Women swapped gossip over shared plates of food. Men sang old songs that echoed through the alleys. For a moment, poverty faded, and the neighborhood glowed with life. But a quiet fear pulsed beneath it all. They knew the city's powerful didn't give a damn about them. Cops, courts, politicians, they dismissed them as nobodies, just poor black folks. Elise would hold Ethan close, her arms a shield, and dream of a day when he'd be known for his heart, his mind, not the color of his skin or the street he called home. She didn't know it yet, but a storm was coming, one that would test her strength like nothing before. Elise often saw Ethan glued to his computer, headphones on, his face lit by the screen's glow. He'd laugh, typing away, lost in some far-off digital world. At least he's safe at home, she'd think, away from the dangers of the streets, gangs, fights, or worse. But danger doesn't always lurk in alleys. Sometimes it slips through wires, hiding behind a screen. At first, it seemed harmless. Ethan made new friends online, other kids, or so he thought. They chatted about video games, traded memes, shared silly videos. It felt like a community, a place where a black kid from a forgotten neighborhood could belong, away from the judgments of a world that often saw him as less. Then the messages changed. These friends started talking about a special club. "It's just for cool kids like you," they said. "Join us, and you'll get gifts, money, even connections to powerful people." Ethan was just 13, innocent, unaware of the cruelty that targeted black children, exploiting a system that rarely protected them. To him, it sounded like a golden ticket, a way out of the struggle he saw his mom endure. First came a few bucks through an app, enough to buy a soda. Then a package arrived, new sneakers, the kind he'd only dreamed of. Then came an invite. "Meet us in person, it'll be fun." But it wasn't a club, it was a trap, a dark web designed to ensnare kids like Ethan, black kids the government overlooked, whose cries for help were dismissed because their lives didn't matter enough to the powerful. One night, Ethan came home different. His eyes were hollow, shadowed with a fear Elise had never seen. He barely spoke, retreating into his room, his laughter gone. For days, he was a ghost of himself, avoiding her gaze. Elise's heart twisted with worry. She'd ask, "Baby, what's wrong?" But he'd just shake his head, his lips sealed. Then, one night, he broke. He sat on the edge of his bed, tears streaming down his face, his voice barely a whisper. "Mama, they said it was just a game." But it wasn't. His words cracked, his shoulders shook. Elise pulled him into her arms, holding him so tight it felt like she could shield him from the world. Her heart shattered, each piece cutting deeper than the last. She wanted to scream, to make the earth swallow her pain. But that night, something else was born in her, a fire, fierce and unyielding, a fire for justice. She wasn't just a mother anymore, she was a warrior. And her target was the man pulling the strings. Aaron, a corrupt powerhouse whose money and connections had silenced countless voices before. Elise knew this fight was bigger than her. Aaron's influence stretched far, through politicians, police, even courts. She was one woman, armed only with a mother's love and a broken tablet. But no mountain is bigger than a mother's burning heart. She sat up nights, combing through Ethan's tablet, reading the messages that had lured him. The words were chilling, promises of fun that turned dark, nudging him toward something sinister. She didn't sleep, her eyes fixed on the screen, her resolve hardening. "This ends with me," she vowed. But as she dug deeper, a bitter truth emerged. This trap wasn't random. It targeted black kids like Ethan, exploiting a system that ignored their pain. If a black man had been behind something like this, the country would be on fire. Headlines screaming, arrests immediate, outrage everywhere. But because the victims were black children, the government dragged its feet, turning a blind eye. It was the same old racism. Black lives mattering less. Black pain dismissed as just how it is. Elise's anger grew. "Why do they care more about punishing us than protecting us?" she whispered to the empty room. Elise knew she couldn't fight alone. Erin's power was a towering wall, but she had something stronger: her community. In the dead of night, a faint glow spilled from her windows. A small group gathered in her cramped living room. Old Walter, a retired lawyer with a sharp mind and a cane. Derek, a young tech whiz who could make computers sing, and Mrs. Clara, whose books had taught generations to dream big. They weren't just neighbors, they were family. A black family forged in the fires of systemic neglect, united by one goal: evidence. Elise placed Ethan's broken tablet on the table, its cracked screen glowing faintly. "This is how they got to him," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "The messages are here. It's our first step." The group leaned in, their faces lit by the screen. The messages were a trail of deceit, promises of games, gifts, then words that pushed towards something darker, something no kid should face. Walter adjusted his glasses, his voice low. "This is gold, Elise, but it's not enough. This trap isn't just after Ethan. It's targeting our whole neighborhood, our black kids, and the system's letting it happen because they don't see our children as worth saving." Derek, barely out of his teens, cracked his knuckles. "I know where these creeps hide online. I can hack into their secret groups, pull their chats, their plans, but it's risky. If they catch me, I'm done for." Elise met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "Derek, our kids are already in danger. We can't afford to play it safe." Mrs. Clara nodded, her voice firm. "This is about our future. We protect our own, especially when the world won't." The next morning, Derek got to work. He set up an old laptop in his basement, using a fake identity to slip into the predator's online world. His fingers flew across the keys, saving every message, image, and hidden link. What he found sent chills through the group: a calculated web of tricks, fake games, online gift cards, promises of fame, all designed to lure black kids like Ethan, kids the government rarely rushed to protect. Names, dates, plans, it was all there, a digital trail of cruelty. Elise's hands shook as she read the files. "This isn't just Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's dozens of kids, maybe hundreds, and Erin's the one pulling the strings. If a black man was running this, the country would be on fire, raids, arrests, headlines everywhere. But because it's black children suffering, the government looks the other way. It's the same racism that's always held us back." They knew the police wouldn't help. Evidence like this would vanish into a dusty cabinet, buried by Erin's influence and the system's indifference to black lives. "We've got to take this to the world," Elise said. "Media, social media, someone out there will listen. But the second we do, they'll come for us." Fear rippled through the room. Walter's hands trembled on his cane. Derek's jaw tightened. Mrs. Clara clutched a book to her chest, but their resolve burned brighter. This wasn't just one mother's fight. It was their war for every black kid in their streets, for a system that valued their lives less. Then word reached them about Marcus Reed, a young black journalist from their neighborhood. Marcus had a reputation for chasing stories the big outlets ignored, stories of black communities dismissed by the powerful. He knocked on Elise's door one evening, a worn notebook in hand, his eyes blazing with purpose. "Miss Elise," he said, "I heard about Ethan. I want to tell your story, not just for him, but for every black kid caught in this trap, ignored by a system that doesn't care." Elise's eyes were weary, but she studied him. "Marcus, these people are dangerous. They'll shut down your paper, get you fired, maybe worse." He grinned, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "My mama taught me that if you've got to die for the truth, that's the truest life you can live. I'm not scared." For the first time in weeks, a spark of hope flickered on Elise's face. She handed him the tablet, the messages, every scrap of evidence they'd gathered. Marcus scribbled in his notebook, his voice steady. "This story's gonna hit every heart that's hungry for justice. and expose how the system fails black kids every day. A mother's pain had found a journalist's voice. Together, they might just crack the walls of Aaron's dark empire. Marcus turned his pen into a sword. He poured Elise's story into a report, working late into the night, his desk littered with coffee cups and notes. He highlighted the racial injustice, the way the trap targeted black kids, how the government dragged its feet because the victims were from communities like theirs, overlooked and undervalued. If a black man had been behind it, the outrage would be immediate, the action swift. But for black victims, silence. He published it on an independent online platform, a site known for giving a voice to the voiceless. The headline was stark: "Hidden Dangers, the trap's targeting our kids, and the system that lets it happen." Within hours, thousands read it. The comments flooded in, raw and real. "This happened to my cousin. My sister was targeted like this. Why do these monsters keep winning, and why does the government ignore black kids?" The story struck a nerve, spreading like wildfire across social media, shared by parents, teachers, strangers who felt the same rage and pain. But the backlash came fast. Marcus's phone buzzed with anonymous calls, voices dripping with menace. "Take that report down, or you'll regret it." Shadows moved outside his apartment at night, their footsteps echoing in the dark. He backed up his files on a secure server, his heart pounding, but he kept digging, tracking down more victims, more witnesses, more evidence. Elise watched the news at home, her hands trembling as she held Ethan's picture. Marcus's report was breaking through, hitting major channels. People were taking to the streets, their signs bold and unyielding. "Justice for our kids. Protect our future. Black lives matter, even our children's," she whispered to the picture. "Baby, your pain's waking the world up and exposing the racism that lets this happen." Across town, Aaron was unraveling in his lavish penthouse. Crystal glasses rattled as he slammed his fist on a polished table. "This damn journalist is gonna ruin everything," he roared, his face red with fury. Politician, grown fat on Aaron's bribes, leaned back in a leather chair, sipping whiskey. "Relax, Aaron. We'll spin it. The media's easy to buy. The public makes noise, then forgets. It's all in your hands." Sure enough, the next morning, big networks pushed a new narrative. "The report's fake," they claimed. "It's a smear campaign by a washed-up journalist stirring racial division." Marcus's social media accounts were hacked, his emails leaked to paint him as a liar. Anchors on TV called him a troublemaker, a fraud, ignoring the racial injustice at the heart of the story. But Elise's community wasn't surprised. They'd seen the system bury their truths before, especially when it highlighted racism against black children. This time, they wouldn't stay quiet. Thousands marched, mothers clutching their kids, fathers raising fists, young folks chanting with fire in their eyes. Signs waved in the air. "No more silence! Save our kids! Why ignore black children's pain?" Elise stood at the front of the crowd, gripping a microphone, tears streaming down her face but her voice like steel. "This fight isn't just for my Ethan. It's for our future. If we go quiet now, no child will be safe tomorrow. This is every mother's question, and it's a call to end the racism that lets our black kids suffer in silence." The crowd roared like thunder. "Justice! Justice!" Then the police rolled in, armored trucks, tear gas, batons, shields. It felt like they were facing an enemy army, not citizens. Clouds of gas choked the air, people scattered, some fell to the ground. Women screamed, kids ran into alleys, their eyes stinging. Elise stood her ground, the gas burning her eyes, but she didn't drop the mic. "You can hurt us, but you can't silence us!" Derek grabbed her arm, his voice urgent. "Elise, they'll arrest you! Move!" She shook her head, her voice cutting through the chaos. "If I back down, we all lose." The crowd's chants grew louder, each voice a cry from the depths of their souls. Aaron watched it all on a hidden surveillance feed in a secret room, a cold smile curling his lips. "They'll scream, they'll bleed, and then they'll forget," he said. "I always win." But he didn't see it. This was the moment a community was knitting together, stronger than ever. Their voices weren't just noise, they were a fire, and it was spreading fast, shining a light on the racial injustice that had allowed this trap to thrive. If a black man had been the one exploiting kids, the government would have acted in days, the country ablaze with outrage. But for black victims, silence. Not anymore. Elise and her community knew the streets alone wouldn't win this war. They needed to fight inside the system, where Aaron's influence couldn't reach. Marcus dug deeper, his nights sleepless, his desk a mess of notes and energy drinks. He uncovered that Aaron's network wasn't just local. It was a global web, tangled with powerful figures, from politicians to insiders in law enforcement. Names, connections, money trails, it was all bigger than they'd imagined, and at its core was the ugly truth. The trap targeted black kids, exploiting a system that rarely protected them, quick to punish black people but slow to defend them. He sat with Elise one evening, his voice steady but urgent. "Miss Elise, this isn't just our fight anymore. It's for every black kid caught in this trap, ignored by a government that sees our pain as less worthy. If a black man was behind this, they'd have the whole country on fire. We need a court free from Aaron's grip." Elise nodded, her eyes burning with resolve. "Marcus, if this is for our kids' future, I'll fight till my last breath." They built a new plan. Derek pushed his skills to the limit, hacking into Aaron's secret servers. He pulled emails, chat logs, even videos that laid bare the ugly truth. A network designed to exploit black kids, hidden behind fake smiles and promises. Every file he saved was a risk, but he didn't stop. "This is for Ethan," he'd mutter, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Old Walter, the retired lawyer, dusted off his old contacts and rallied a team of human rights attorneys. They worked pro bono, driven by the same fire that burned in Elise. Mrs. Clara went door to door, urging parents to join the cause, her voice fierce. "This is about our black kids," she'd say. "We protect our own when the system won't." Marcus sent his report to global media outlets, bypassing the big networks Aaron controlled. An independent platform picked it up, and the story exploded. Protect Our Kids trended worldwide, shared by mothers, fathers, even strangers from across the globe who felt Elise's pain as their own. Comments poured in. "This is our fight, too. No more silence." But Aaron wasn't one to go down quietly. He unleashed an army of lawyers, filing lawsuits that called the evidence fake, the story a fabrication. Marcus got more threatening calls, cold, menacing voices warning him to stop. One night, shadowy figures lingered outside his apartment, their footsteps echoing in the dark. He double-checked his locks, saved his files to a secure server, and kept writing. Elise faced attacks, too. Cars started parking outside her house, their engines idling in the dark. Strangers watched Ethan on his way to school, their eyes cold, but she didn't flinch. She gathered the neighborhood women, forming a group to teach parents about online dangers. They went door to door, sharing tips on spotting scams, checking kids' devices, keeping them safe. "We're not just fighting for justice," Elise told them. "We're fighting to protect the next black kid because if we don't, who will? The government sure as hell isn't rushing to help our children." One night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, she ran her fingers through his hair, her voice soft but fierce. "This isn't just for you, baby," she whispered. "It's for every child lost in this darkness, especially our black kids who the system lets down every day." Ethan looked up, his eyes still shadowed but stronger. "Mama, you're not alone, are you?" She smiled, tears welling. "No, baby. We've got a whole community behind us." Months of relentless work paid off. Their evidence reached an independent court, one free from Aaron's influence thanks to international pressure from the viral story. The trial began, and the world watched. Elise took the stand, her voice trembling but unbreakable. She told Ethan's story, her words raw and honest. She shared the pain of other black kids who'd come forward, their voices finally breaking through the silence, highlighting how the government's inaction stemmed from the same racism that had plagued their community for generations. Aaron's lawyers tried everything. They attacked Elise's character, called her a desperate mother spinning lies. They branded Marcus a fraud, his evidence fabricated. They dismissed the community as troublemakers stirring up racial division. But the truth was heavier than their lies. Derek's digital files, emails, chats, videos laid bare the network's cruelty. Marcus's reports gave it context, a narrative that couldn't be ignored, exposing the racial bias that allowed it to thrive. Elise's testimony gave it a heart, a mother's voice that echoed in every listener's soul. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Days felt like years. Elise spent nights praying, holding Ethan close, whispering, "We're almost there, baby." The day of the verdict came. Elise stood outside the courthouse holding Ethan's hand. He was quiet, his grip tight, but his eyes held a flicker of hope. The whole neighborhood was there. Old Walter leaning on his cane, Mrs. Clara clutching a book, Derek with his laptop slung over his shoulder. They stood as one, a black community forged in the fires of injustice, ready for whatever came next. When the judge declared Aaron and his network guilty, a hush fell over the crowd. Then it broke. Cheers erupted, raw and joyful. People hugged, tears mixed with laughter, hope flooding the air like sunlight after a storm. Elise pulled Ethan close, looking to the sky, her voice a whisper. "Baby, we won. Your voice reached every heart and showed the world the racism that lets black kids suffer in silence." Ethan buried his face in her shoulder, his voice muffled. "Thank you, Mama." Aaron's empire crumbled. His network was exposed, his allies scrambling to distance themselves. The story didn't end in the courtroom. Elise took the fight further, opening a community center in the neighborhood to teach black kids about online safety. Mrs. Clara donated her entire book collection, turning it into a library for young dreamers. Derek started tech classes, showing kids how to use computers safely, turning his skills into a shield. Walter held weekly workshops, teaching parents their legal rights, his old lawyer's fire reignited. Marcus's report won a Global Journalism Award, sparking a movement for stronger laws against online exploitation, with a focus on protecting marginalized communities like theirs. He traveled the world, speaking at conferences, but he never forgot where it started. Every time he saw Elise, he'd say, "Miss Elise, this was your fight. We just amplified your voice and called out the system that fails black children." Elise still sat on her old wooden chair at dusk, gazing at the stars. But her prayer had changed. "Lord, give every child the strength you gave me. Give every mother the courage you granted me." Ethan was healing, slowly. He'd started reading again, his laughter returning in small bursts. One evening, he sat beside Elise under the stars, holding a book. "Mama," he said, "I want to be like you, strong." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "You already are, baby. This isn't just Elise's story. It's every mother's who fights for her kids. It's not just one neighborhood's tale. It's every black community that rises against injustice, against a system that ignores their pain. It's not just a victory. It's the hope of a new dawn, where the fire of truth burns away the darkness, and black children are finally protected as they deserve. Protect your kids from online dangers. Talk to them, check their devices, teach them to stay safe. Share this story to spread awareness. Check the links in the description for resources on online safety. Thank you for joining Elise's journey. Let's keep fighting for our kids. Protect our kids. Black Lives Matter.